Welcome to Cascadia Daily News.
Thank you.
Today we're here with Representative Joe Timmons, the Democratic candidate running for re-election in the 42nd District, Position 2. With me are Ron Judd, CDN's executive editor, our publisher Cynthia Pope, and CDN reporter Charlotte Alden, who's covering this race. Ron and Cynthia are voting members of the CDN editorial board.
So thank you for being here and taking part. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I mean, if I may, I appreciate the citizens' agenda, honestly. I mean, just seeing the questions, not only the 5 that rose to the top, but the other ones too, just seeing what's on folks' minds. It's like doorbelling. You know, you never know what you're going to hear out there, and it's nice to get a feeling of what folks are, where their head's at. So I appreciate it. Appreciate everyone's time here and the opportunity to be before y'all.
Well, as Ron said, here we'll have a chance to expand a little bit on some of those questions, and we'll also talk about some other questions. But
Great.
The first citizens agenda question, and one that is on everyone's mind in this area, is housing. And the question is, what will you do about the housing crisis? Not just the lack of stock, but also the average and middle class affordability and predatory investors and landlords.
Yeah, I really appreciate this question. It's an issue that is on my mind and going to be one of my top priorities if reelected. It was one of my top priorities going into Olympia. It's going to be one of my top priorities if I go back, because unfortunately it's still a major problem in our community and around the state. I know our challenges firsthand. As I said in my questionnaire, you know, our family's rent went up 35% in 2021. We had a 1-year-old at the time, and it was really challenging on our family. But unfortunately, when I talk with folks, our story is not that unique. I had a gentleman who came to my kickoff event whose rent went up 40% in Blaine. So there is more work to be done to try to help folks who are spending way too much of their money on housing. It's very difficult for folks to save to buy a first-time home, to save up for emergencies and other assets if they're spending all their money on housing. So I'm very concerned about that. I think fundamentally this is a supply and demand crisis. I believe in supply and demand economics, and I just think that this market is off balance. I think we have demand that is not keeping up with supply. We passed a bill last year, a missing middle bill in the legislature, that's going to help increase density and increase the number of units we have in Bellingham, which I hope will help bring down that curve. But it's going to take a while for that fully to be felt by a lot of folks who are paying a lot of money on housing. So what can we do to do more? I think, we need to make sure that that bill works. I think we need to work with builders to make sure that they have the tools and they have the resources that they need, and to build more, because I think that's the only way ultimately we're going to get out of this challenge. But I think we also need to be looking at more supports for tenants and renters. We had a bill that we passed out of the House. It was an Emily Alvarado bill that would have, it's a rent stabilization bill. It would have limited rent increases to 7% a year. And I think it was exempting, I know it was new build, I think it was 10 years, I want to say the final version might have been 15. But I think that's really important too, because we don't want to disincentivize building more, because ultimately I think this is a supply and demand shortage, a supply shortage crisis. So that's going to be a priority of mine if I go back down to Olympia. I know Emily is going to reintroduce the bill. It died in the Senate. I'm really hoping that senators are hearing from their constituents the need to get this bill done, because frankly, I think a lot of folks are spending too much of their money on housing, and it's limiting their ability to spend on other things. So that's something I'm really committed to. I'd like to explore more options of how we can get more folks into first-time home ownership. My wife, my family, and I were able to purchase a home soon after our rent went up in 2021. We're now homeowners in our community, very proud of that. And I think everyone should have that opportunity if they want to. And I think that, you know, it's the best way to build family wealth, and it's the best way to stop intergenerational poverty by having these assets that we can provide to one another. So I'm interested in working more on that front as well. But that rent stabilization bill, to me, is the first thing that we need to do in order to prevent folks from spending 35, 40, 50, 60% of their income on housing.
Okay. Another issue that's of great interest to our readers is education.
Yeah.
And the question was, what will you do to bring fair and equitable funding to all public school districts in Washington? And is the state's adjustment factor working?
Yeah, the state's formula right now is not working for everybody. I think that students in Mount Baker and Blaine and Bellingham deserve the same educational opportunities as students in Bellevue. I don't think it's working fairly. This formula, as you all probably are aware with, and hopefully readers are as well, came out of the McCleary decision, the fix for the McCleary lawsuit that I think was just over a decade ago. So I think we have a new opportunity to fix a lot of this stuff. I think we have a lot of legislators, myself included, who weren't around during that McCleary era, who are excited to be looking at education funding, where I think a lot of folks previously were frankly burnt out with it. So I think we have an opportunity there, and we're seeing, unfortunately, the growing need around the state to look at this. Just look at Seattle and all the cuts that they need to make there. So if this isn't on more legislators' radars, I think it will be as more districts struggle. What can be done? I think we need to relook at how we fund schools fundamentally. We increased in my first term the cap that districts could be reimbursed for the state for special education. We upped it from 13% to 15% last year, and then another percent to 16% this year. We wanted to go to 17 in the House, but the Senate had other ideas, and that's similar to rent stabilization, a conversation for another day. But so I don't think that the way we fund schools is working. But I also think it's important to look at how we got here. We have decreasing enrollments around the state. We have decreasing enrollments at a time we also have the ESSER funds, the one-time federal funding for COVID, going away for districts. So it's kind of a perfect storm for our districts right now and why they're struggling. How I'm going to try to work on that is working with colleagues. I serve on the Education Committee, which gives me some insight into this issue, but we don't deal with the purse strings in the Education Committee. That's the Appropriations Committee that deals with that. So I am in good conversations with colleagues. I've been having meetings with folks during the interim to try to figure out what we can do to address this problem. I think it's really important to listen to superintendents and to listen to educators as part of that, of what they're seeing in the classroom. I have a meeting later this afternoon with one of our superintendents, for example. So more needs to be done. I'll be honest, though, I was more cautiously optimistic that we could get things done a few months ago until I'm hearing more of the challenges we have in our state budget coming up for next year. We have decreasing revenues and we have increasing caseloads that we have to fund. So I am hopeful that we can continue to work at this issue, but I think until we right our ship in our state budget, it's going to be hard to really fix this problem in a very tangible, wholehearted way.
Is education one of the issues you found in your first term of being in the state legislature as one that you were particularly interested in? Was there something that happened there that said, okay, education is what I want to be focused on? Yeah,
thanks, Dean, for the question. Education's always been near and dear to my heart. I was a preschool teacher back before graduate school. I worked at Western Washington University in government relations. I serve on the K-12 committee and also the post-secondary education and workforce committee, which I think is really important to have that continuum represented in our delegation. We have Western just outside the 42nd district, and we have two community and technical colleges in the 42nd and Northwest Indian College in the 42nd as well. So education, whether it's K-12 or the learning and post-secondary, is something I always want to work on as long as I'm in this role. I'm a product of Washington State Public Schools myself. I had educators that fundamentally changed my life in high school in particular. So yeah, I'm committed to working on this issue. I think we have a growing number of folks who, again, were coming in post-McCleary that are committed to working on this. So for as long as I'm in this role, I want to be able to help our students and our educators here in Whatcom County and around the state.
Infrastructure is another one of those issues that everyone is concerned about. You just have to drive on the roads to know that. Do you think the current state infrastructure, that is utilities, transportation, parks, is up to the standards that taxpayers expect? And if not, what specific things can we do to change that?
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting question to me to see that because, up to what taxpayers expect. I think taxpayers expect different things and different communities have different access to different levels of infrastructure. So for me, I'm concerned with the inequity in that. I think Bellingham is doing a better job of putting parks in lower income neighborhoods and in neighborhoods with more people of color, which I'm excited about. I want to work with our local governments on those kind of local projects and helping to get funds for that. I toured recently in Linden funding a project they got funding for from the Public Works Board, Public Works account, sorry. So that's a way that we as a legislature, I think, can fund these things that local governments can then tap into. So that's something I'm really want to be cognizant of. When it comes to our state's transportation infrastructure, we have our work cut out for us. We passed the Move Ahead Washington and Connecting Washington plans before my time in the legislature. Those are playing out now, but cost overruns are making things really challenging. And I think we have our work cut out for us in how we find the funds to stand to that commitment that taxpayers expect. We also have a federal mandate to replace fish passage barriers. These are culverts. I think we've done the first 80% or 90% of that work, but the last 10% is going to cost just about the same amount. We've already taken care of the low-hanging fruit, and now these are more expensive projects. So I'm committed to that. We owe it to our tribes, and frankly, we have a federal mandate to do it. So I'm committed to doing that. That's a long way of saying no. I don't think we're up to par. I don't think we're at the level of what people expect. So I'm committed to continuing to keep doing that. But I'm also recognizing that we need to fix what we have already. You know, everyone loves a ribbon cutting. They're sexy. They have a photo op. They're great. We need to take care of what we got. You know, we got to fix potholes. We got to make sure that our highways are up to snuff, and that people who are trying to get to work don't blow out a tire and then have a burden that maybe they can't afford as a result. So that's something, you know, I've been vice chair in the House Transportation Committee my first term, one of 3 vice chairs. It's been an eye-opening process. I get to work with Chair Fye, Jake Fye from Tacoma, and it's a very bipartisan process. That's something I really value, and Jake does as well. We meet weekly with our, as the vice chairs and also the ranking members, so Republicans across the aisle, to talk about the budget. And, you know, it's something that I'm really proud of, that we can do that in the House. I know the Senate does that in different ways, and we all have our ways of doing things. But one of the things that I've tried to continually push in those meetings is the need for maintenance and preservation, to take care of what we have on our public roadways, our state highways, in addition to building new things. That's a long way of saying no. I don't think it's what everyone expects. I think some communities around the state have better infrastructure than others, but not everybody. And part of that too, to me, needs to be internet, needs to be part of this conversation. It's not necessarily part of our transportation committee, but the pandemic exacerbated these inequities, in my opinion, in our community. And part of that is equal access to internet, which is essential for schools, it's essential for businesses, it's essential for folks seeking medical care as well. So I want to continue to work with our local PUD and other local governments that are going to be trying to do more broadband expansion. I hope I answered that question, Gene. I don't know, kind of rambled there, but yes, I think it depends who you ask. I think, but no, I think we have more to do. You know, I'm proud of some of the work we've done, but we have more to do.
In your answer to the questions, you noted that you're opposing Initiative 2117,
yeah,
which would repeal Washington's Climate Commitment Act. Why?
Well, first and foremost, you know, I, like many others, believe that climate change is a real threat to human civilization. And I'm proud to live in a state that is doing something about that. This is a state policy that is leading in the country in terms of stepping up to try to reduce our carbon emissions. So for that reason, I support the CCA, but more importantly, why I support the CCA and not repeal of the CCA is because it takes away a lot of the things that we are investing in as a state as a result. You know, I mentioned in my questionnaire the Ride for Free program for youth who are 18 and under who can ride transit, Amtrak, Washington State ferries for free as a result of funding from the CCA. The electrification of our school buses so students with asthma don't have to breathe in diesel fumes. This is part of our future as a state if we keep the CCA, as well as electrification, public infrastructure to charge cars. If we want folks to you know, invest in electric vehicles, we need to have charging stations that they can tap into. And so the CCA helps fund that. And back to the infrastructure one, something I didn't mention in the questionnaire too, but Senator Shoemaker and I really worked hard this last year. She's vice chair on the Senate Transportation Committee to get $1 million in planning for the Kendall Trail. This is all out of CCA funding that will go away if this initiative passes. This is a active bike ped trail along 547 that's going to help community in East Whatcom County get to school, get to the library safely. And that's another example that goes away if the CCA, if this initiative passes. So I oppose this initiative. I hope voters will join me. I hope that They'll make an informed decision of what is at our fingertips that we can tap into as a community that will no longer be there before casting their ballot.
Last question from Citizens Agenda, and I think this, if I recall, this was actually the question we asked the last time you ran for this office.
Okay, I don't remember that. That's good. Yeah.
Which is, what can you do to ensure PeaceHealth and other hospital groups in the state provide price transparency and screen patients for financial assistance eligibility?
Yeah, and as I said in the questionnaire, I'm excited that the legislature's already done some things. There was a bill before my time to increase essentially tapping into charity for our hospitals to screen patients. We also had a bill last year that would strengthen the healthcare cost transparency board. So to me, part A is making sure that these bills are carried out in the way that they were intended. It's been interesting as a first-term legislator. I've passed 8 bills out of 14. Proud of that batting average, but once the bill passes, you can't just say it's done. We got to follow up with state agencies to make sure that these things are carried out. And so that's part one. Part two, I'm increasingly concerned about medical debt for folks. I was recently talking with the chair of our House Healthcare Committee, Marcus Riccelli from Spokane. I know this is a priority for him and something that I would love to work with him on and support. Something he's looking at is how we can prevent medical debt from impacting people's credit scores. And so that's something that I think as a state we need to be looking at, of how we can support folks who don't have reserve funds, don't have savings when an emergency occurs, and that those unexpected medical costs don't impact their lives and their financial well-being for many years to come. So that's my way of saying I think we've passed some things in recent years. I think we need to make sure that that is carried out as intended. If not, I'm a big believer in getting something done instead of making it perfect. If it's not perfect the first time, we can go back and fix it. Then it's our job to make sure that. And then also, I think we need to be looking at how we can help folks in medical debt and how we can prevent folks from experiencing medical debt in the first place.
Thank you. Ron, I know you have questions.
I just wanted to follow up a little bit about what you said about 2117.
Yeah,
it's
please.
Always difficult, as you know, politically to get people to vote no on an initiative they think is going to save them money. There seems to be a fairly robust campaign, though, organized against that initiative. Do you think it's going to be effective? And what are your fears about that issue in general? Are you confident that it's going to be shot down by voters?
I'm cautiously optimistic, is what I'd say. And in addition to the CCA, I am a big believer that we need to protect the capital gains tax. I don't know about you all. I don't know anyone paying the capital gains tax, and it's funding, K-12 and early learning around the state. So when I think about these two initiatives together, to me, I think it's on folks that want to protect these programs to make the case of what's going to be taken away. And in the case of the capital gains tax, it's early learning funding and K-12 funding. And in the case of the CCA, it's all these other projects and programs I talked about. And there's many more as well. I mean, I just talked about the tip of the iceberg. So I think if we can make that case, Ron, I think that we have a good chance of winning in November. I think it's on us to make that case, though.
You think those two could go together, or is there a place for some voters to be carved out? Like they might want to save the capital gains tax, but this one might save me at the pump, or do they?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I definitely think there's
That's
a
the
difference
risk, right?
between the two.
Yeah.
I'm more confident in the capital gains one, personally. I'm more nervous about the CCA one going away, just because I think it's a harder case to make. And I think it's a more complicated issue when you talk about carbon credits and that whole marketplace and that, and the cost of the pump, as you're talking about as well. So I have confidence in voters of Washington. I think the initiative process serves a very important role in our state. And I hope that the voters will see it the way I do.
The capital gains tax, obviously, it sounds like you've mentioned a couple times a lack of funding for these other issues, and our state financial system in general has seemed to lag behind needs in this state for a long time, in my opinion. The capital gains tax is a small step towards rectifying that. Do you have other ideas to make, I know that's a big question.
Yeah.
Overhauling the state's financial system involves the Constitution and many other things. But, somebody like yourself who has progressive ideas, these things all cost money.
Yeah.
Where does the money come from is what people are thinking, down the road. And that's a fair question. So I can see why you're keen on the capital gains tax in that, a lot of us don't pay it, most of us don't pay it, but somebody thinks I might someday have to pay it.
Yeah, no, that's right. I think last I saw, there's only 20 folks in the 42nd legislative district that pay into the capital gains tax, about 60 in Whatcom County. And, we have we have historically had the most regressive tax structure in the country. I think we're now number 2, which is great, behind Florida. It's Florida or Texas, but they're right around there with us. And that's ahead of us, I should say. So you're right. I mean, I think that we're going to have a challenging budget process this coming session. If these initiatives pass, we're going to have an extremely challenging budget process in the next session. So I think it's too soon to say what's going to be on the table, but I think all different ideas are going to be on the table. I've had, a lot of my colleagues have introduced revenue bills in recent years that haven't necessarily passed. And so I think particularly if these initiatives pass, we have to be looking at all options as we think about how to meet our commitment to education and public health and all housing and all the other things that cost money.
Charlotte, you've been covering this race. I'm sure you have some questions.
Yeah, I think on the initiative topic, I wanted to ask you what your position is on Initiative 2066 on natural gas.
Yeah, I'm supportive of that initiative, actually. And the reason I am is because I'm concerned of costs for folks, for costs on working families. And I think that this initiative will help prevent some potentially future costs going up for folks as they transition away from natural gas. This is a bill that came before, largely connected to this initiative that came before the legislature the last 2 years. Candidly, this is, I think, the only bill that I changed my vote on that I can remember from 2023 to 2024. I voted against that bill this year. I voted for it in 2023 in full transparency. But the reason I changed my vote is because I heard from a lot of constituents, frankly, about their concerns of their costs going up. And it really, as I dug deeper into it, I'm just concerned of the cost of folks. I love heat pumps. I wish everyone could have one for free. But electrification costs money. And at a time where our family is struggling to pay the bills, like a lot of folks in Whatcom County, I'm concerned that if that initiative passed, it could increase the financial squeeze on folks.
I guess my follow-up question is how to you does that align with your commitments to climate change and a green transition? Yeah.
It's a great question. I mean, we know natural gas does have some negative climate impacts and environmental impacts, but I don't think it's the biggest polluter. I don't think it's the biggest challenge that we need to be looking at as we reduce our carbon emissions.
Great. I had a few questions about education.
Sorry, Charlotte, if I could just elaborate on that real quick.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
I think, part of what I like about the CCA is really its focus on the transportation sector. That's our number one, the transportation sector is our number one emitter in terms of carbon emissions. And so as we look to more electrification in terms of our transportation models, that's a big reason why I support the CCA. So I see some overlap, you're totally right, but I see that there's a difference between the two.
Great. I had a follow-up on your answer on education earlier. I do reporting on education in this county, and there's lots of reasons why districts are seeing enrollment declines from, people not being able to afford living a place, or there not being housing, or just fewer children. And then there's also the reasons of kids don't feel served by the public school system. Mm-hmm. What do you think could be done at the state level to try to address some of those enrollment challenges that maybe aren't due to just fewer children?
Yeah. Well, I think fewer children is a big part of it, though. So I'll get to the second part. I don't mean to dodge it necessarily, but I think fewer children is a big part of it. And I think Working families are feeling the squeeze financially right now. Affordability is something I hear most at the doors, housing in particular. And so I know we always often think of these issues as separate. We have separate committees for these things. They're not as siloed, I think, as we sometimes make them out to be. When folks are spending as much money on housing as they are right now, I don't think they can afford to have more kids. My wife and I have one son, a 4-year-old. Our plan is to have one, and that's it, But, frankly, if we had a second one, I don't know if we could afford it right now. And so I think we really need to look at how we can make costs easier for folks and to help folks save so they can have more children if that's something they want to do, which of course will increase enrollment. But I think COVID was really tough on our schools and on our families for so many reasons. And I think that, as we saw some families pull students out of public schools and into private schools that were maybe engaging in more in-person learning, now those students have those connections and those families have that enrollment as part of their budget. So my hope is that we need to make the case that our public schools are doing a great job, that they are graduating folks at a great rate, that these students do have opportunities, and hopefully we'll see more confidence in putting students in the public school system.
Great. I wanted to ask you a question about something the Linden School Board recently did.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've received the letter yet, but they sent a letter to you and Senator Shoemake and Representative Rule on transgender inclusion in high school girls sports. And they're looking for the legislature to do something to review the current stance of that. What is your perspective on this issue?
My perspective is that we need to respect everyone and their gender identities. And I don't agree, frankly, with the amount of attention and resources that go into discussing this issue when we have so many other urgent issues. I talked recently with Ralph Schwartz about cell phone use in classrooms, for example. I wish the Linden School Board and others would be focused on these issues that have a much larger impact on student mental health and academic well-being than that particular issue. So I think it's not that it's not on some people's minds. I don't think it's on the majority of parents in Whatcom County, and I wish our school boards would be focused on other issues that have a more tangible impact on students' day-to-day lives.
Great. And then I had one more question about education. When we talked earlier this year, you were discussing a bill that you wanted to put forward, I think related to social emotional learning.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and in that you talked about, wanting to increase access to this kind of education, but not do it in a way that's an unfunded mandate.
Yep.
And I wanted to ask you about unfunded mandates and local control. I know that is also something that school boards here have been talking about, and how you approach those issues and pushing forward things that you want to see in schools while also respecting schools' differences in that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I appreciate you bringing it up. It's a bill that I don't know if I'll bring it back if reelected in its current form, but I will bring a bill back in some way, shape, or form that deals with social emotional instruction, because it's proven to reduce anxiety and depression. It's proven to reduce bullying, and it's proven to increase academic engagement. And so these are things that I think we need to be focused on. I'm very concerned about the state of youth mental health. This is a way, one tool in the toolbox to try to work upstream to teach students empathy and to have these other results that I just mentioned, right? I was at a ribbon cutting for a youth mental health clinic in Everson last summer. Some of you might have been there. There was over 100 folks there in attendance in, 90-something degree heat. It was amazing to see. And while I support these clinics and I support serving youth in crisis, we need to work upstream to prevent that crisis in the first place. And so this bill was a step in that direction intended to do that. The reason it didn't have a mandate was exactly as you said. I do believe in supporting our local districts. When I talked with superintendents, they were supportive of this legislation, but didn't want it to be a mandate that wasn't covered. And frankly, they've told me, Joe, we've had so many mandates in recent years because of COVID that I didn't want to add one more into that as these districts are going through financial challenges. So it was meant to encourage school districts to do, well, it did encourage school districts to do that and have funding through OSPI that these districts could tap into for curriculum and support to enact that curriculum. Passed out of the House, didn't pass out of the Senate. I'm hoping to bring it back. But to your point, I support local control. I support local school. I think, we have local control in our schools. We have local school boards for a reason. They can talk about whatever they want to talk about, whether it's trans youth or whether it's, youth mental health. That's where I hope that they would focus on more of these issues. But I try to listen to my superintendents. I try to listen to these folks who are on the ground, educators included, so that we don't pass something that has unintended consequences. So that's how I try to balance it, is I really believe in strong relationships and open door communication, and that helps me make informed policy decisions before we pass something that has unintended consequences. When that bill was originally drafted, I thought about a mandate, right? And then I heard from from superintendents, and I heard from others that would be really challenging for folks right now. So as they are trying to pull themselves out of the pandemic. And so that's why I made that change. And I think that it's really important as legislators that we listen to folks who are doing the work on the ground. I'm not an expert in everything. I recognize that. So I try to hear from folks who are. And not that we're always going to agree on everything, but we need to have open door communication, I think. And I'm proud to live in a county that has diverse political views, a purple county, so to speak. And I think the worst thing we can do right now in our county and our country is not talk to each other in a respectful way about our differences.
The question about transgender athletes is a reminder of how national issues are finding their way into local discourse.
Absolutely.
Another one of those issues is abortion, reproductive rights. And some states have passed laws that make it illegal for women to come to states like Washington, which does guarantee reproductive rights. Should the state of Washington be a sanctuary for reproductive rights? How can we protect the rights of those women who come to this state?
Absolutely, it should, Dean. And I think we are in a lot of ways. We passed a bill last year. I want to say it was House Bill 1155, but don't quote me on that. It was a Vondina Slatter bill. It was My Health, My Data, that would protect patient data and also protect professionals who are providing reproductive health care. Because we don't want folks to not engage in that health care if they fear for their license. And we don't want patients to not engage in that health care because they fear that their data could be shared and that they could be punished down the road for it in their home state or wherever. So I do think we need to be a sanctuary. I think, unfortunately, the federal government has failed us on this issue, and that it's more important now than ever for states to step up and take a stand. I think Washington State is doing that. I think Washington State needs to continue to do that and be vocal about it. Very proud today's Monday, so last week I just received the endorsement of Planned Parenthood of Greater Washington and North Idaho. Very proud of that. And I will continue to stand up for reproductive health care as long as I'm in the legislature.
Another national issue that is finding its way into local politics is election security.
Yeah.
And I hesitate to even ask this question because we have a good history in the state of Washington. But do you have confidence in the integrity of elections in the state of Washington?
I absolutely do. I have confidence in our auditor here locally. I have confidence in our Secretary of State. I do believe that our process is fair. I believe that it's accessible, increasingly accessible, by not having to need a stamp to return your ballot, for example. I think that's a great step in the right direction. That reduces barriers to people voting. I will stand by the results of this election, whatever they are. But it's frankly unfortunate that I need to say that, I think. I think that our election officials work very, very hard. I think they are public servants in a time where they are under increasing attack. And I encourage the public to reach out to our auditor's office or our Secretary of State's office if they'd like to learn more about our process and how it works. And I know our auditor's office is always willing to try to share more information to alleviate any doubts. But no, without a doubt, I have confidence in our system.
Thank you. Cynthia.
You worked for several years as staffer to elected officials, and
did.
now you are the elected
Yeah,
official.
yeah.
You're surprised when you stepped into the job? Was it different than you thought it would be, looking at it from a staffer's point of view?
Yes, it's a trip. It's a trip. It is the greatest honor of my professional career to represent the 42nd in the House. When I sit there on the House floor, my desk is right in the middle of the House floor, and I get to just breathe in that ambiance. It is an incredible feeling. I interned down in the Senate with the Senate Democrats in Olympia in 2010 when I was in grad school. That's where I kind of got the bug and was like, wow, I don't know what this place is, but I want to be a part of this in some way, shape, or form. Serving for Governor Inslee and Julia Patterson in King County before that was an extremely educational experience. I think very highly of both of those elected officials. I learned a lot through those processes, especially working for the governor during COVID. He made some very difficult decisions. It was my job to communicate those to the public in 5 counties. I was his outreach rep for Snohomish, Skagit, Whatcom Island, and San Juan counties. So I got to build a lot of relationships, though, through that job that I now continue to this day and have helped serve me in this role. It is different than I expected in that, I'll be honest, it's a lot to juggle. My wife works full-time for the county health department. We have a 4-year-old. When I'm home, I try to take on more childcare. I try to take on more duties around the house. Juggling family life with a demanding job, a secondary job, and a campaign is a lot. And so that's something that I didn't fully know what I was getting into. Candidly, I'm kind of glad I didn't. But I remain committed to it, and I know my wife Heather supports me in it because I believe in public service and she does, and I think this is one way that I can serve our community. But I guess I will say, though, it's, to answer your question more specifically, there are so many things that I didn't expect. I cried multiple times during my first term, I'll be honest. I cried when we passed the assault weapon ban. I sit next to Tana Sen, who's the chair of our state's Early Learning and Human Services Committee, and we held hands, and when we pressed that button and hugged, and I cried. I was in 9th grade when Columbine happened. It had a profound impact on me, and to know that those weapons are no longer going to be sold in this state, I didn't expect that, I guess, that wave of emotion would come at different times, and then you just move on to the next thing because everything moves so quick. So I really care for this job. I love this job, and I hope to be able to do it for a long time.
I was going to follow up on that by asking how you see your political trajectory in the future, but it sounds like you're committed to this job for the foreseeable future.
I love working in the legislature. It's an honor. I think state government is a place where people can still work across the aisle, which I really value. I had 14 bills my first term. The majority of those had a Republican co-sponsor. I believe very much in working across the aisle. I'm sure some of that happens in Congress and at the federal level, but I know it happens in our state, and I really value that. And so I think Washington State is still a place we can get things done. And if we do something right here, other states will take notice, and it becomes part of the national conversation. So state government's where my heart's at. I hope to serve in the legislature for a long time, and anything beyond that, we'll take it as it comes. Yeah.
Quick follow-up on elections. Some states have had some success and some challenges with ranked choice voting.
Yeah.
Maine, Alaska. Do you think ranked choice voting is something we should think about doing in the state of Washington? Yeah,
candidly, it's an issue I'd like to learn more about. I really would. I think it's something that we should explore. I'd love to see more of how it's taking effect elsewhere. One thing I really like about it is that I've heard, at least, that it makes candidates less likely to attack one another because they want each other's supporters for some votes. I love that about the process. If it leads to more civic discourse and civility, I could really see the benefits of that. So definitely think we should explore it. And frankly, I need to learn a little bit more about that issue before casting a vote.
Ron?
This predates you, so it's really probably not a fair question, but I'm asking it of all the candidates who are in Olympia, and that's the notion of legislative privilege and exemption from the State Open Records Act,
Yeah.
which to me is kind of a unique legal theory, and it's still being played out. What's your stance on that issue? Should your deliberative process be exempted from the Open Records Act?
Yeah, it's a great question, Ron. I appreciate it. I've served in various roles in state government and local government where all my stuff is open to public records. I'm used to that. So I have never and don't intend to use that legislative privilege. I think ultimately it's up to each legislator on that. But I for one, have not utilized that and don't intend to, because I think that what we do is the people's business.
But the work that you do on committees, for example, if any member of that committee claims that privilege, then you're sort of involved in that, are you not? By extension.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends that's a good question.
I guess I'm interested in drilling down on the concept.
On the concept
Should the
of it.
legislature itself have an exemption from its own Open Records Act, granted with the potential impact of that, where there are a lot of nuisance suits and nuisance requests?
Yeah.
Too.
I'm not sure, to be honest. I know for me, I don't intend to utilize it. I haven't utilized it. If there are, to your point about committees, if there are things that I send to committee members, if I get asked the same thing,
you'll give them to us.
Yes, exactly right. The media will have access to it.
Good.
The public will have access to it. But I think you're right too, though, that there unfortunately are people who are trying to make it incredibly demanding and sucks a lot of time of our staff. And our staff do a tremendous job in Olympia and in other roles of government. And it's kind of exhausting to have to go down these rabbit holes that may or may not be intended just to waste time. That's not what I think the Open Public Meetings Act is and the Public Records Act is intended for. So, but I don't know how we stop that, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
We talked a bit about climate change and its impact on some of the initiatives that we're having. And as you know, we've had major flooding and heat waves in this area in recent years. What's the future of farming here, and what can the legislature do to support the farm economy?
Great question. I'm so concerned with natural disasters and weather impacts. They are increasing with frequency and severity. The flooding we had in Whatcom County in recent years is devastating. I took it upon myself as a result of that to really make that a priority for me in my first term. I passed 2 bills related to this. One is for an emergency medical reserve corps. I think it's House Bill 1452. What that does is it creates a network of volunteers through the Department of Health, mental health counselors, doctors, custodians who can be activated in a time of natural disaster to assist with the local effort. And another bill is for a public infrastructure assistance program. There's a bill I passed last year, House Bill 2020. And what that will do is help local communities rebuild after natural disasters. I don't think as a state we should be reliant on the federal government for all of our work around natural disasters, as we see sometimes the federal government can be a hornet's nest and shut down. And I don't think that our cities like Sumas or Everson or Nooksack should have to wait for them, and that the state should also, if they can't afford to rebuild a library or rebuild a road or rebuild a sidewalk, that the state should step in to assist. So I say that as some background of saying, I'm committed to this work. I'll be committed to this work for as long as I'm in the legislature because it really impacts our residents and my constituents. When it comes specifically to farming, that's a great question. I think that we might need to be looking at things at the state that can help farmers rebuild, like we do with local governments in our public infrastructure assistance program. So I think we need to be looking at ways for folks to be ready for these things, but also to make sure that they can regrow their crops and have the livelihood that they deserve. it's a tough time for our agricultural community right now in terms of planning and what to expect, and our weather patterns look different. So I hope that I hope farmers will plan ahead, and that if they need things from the state to do that they'll let us know. Happy to have the endorsement of the Washington Farm Bureau. So I look forward to keeping in touch with our agricultural farmers and farm workers on this.
Thank you.
Yep.
We've had a lot of questions about issues.
Yeah.
Gotten into some pretty wonky things, but let's take something just a little softer.
Yeah.
We all have people who have inspired us.
Yeah.
Who's inspired you? Who
Yeah.
are your heroes, your heroines?
Yeah. Thank you for this question. You know, my parents very much are. My parents opened a small business when I was 5. My dad's a pipe fitter, and my folks opened a mechanical contracting company out of our garage when I was 5. My mom was an X-ray technician and left that job to go do the books, and because I don't think my dad knew what he was doing with that. And it's a business that's still in operation today in Burien. My brothers have since taken it over. I'm very proud of that. It's a union shop with UA 32 and sheet metal 66 workers. So seeing my family dedicate their time and energy to growing that business, and seeing the love that they had for their employees. The first person they hired, a guy named Neil, was there I think for 20 or 25 years, his last 20, 25 years before he retired. So my folks had a profound impact on me. When it comes to, you know, political and legislators, I was very excited by the Obama campaign in 2008. He definitely helped steer my direction and go into graduate school. I went to grad school at UW in public administration. So Barack Obama is definitely someone too. His ability to listen a lot, I think, and to not be afraid to show emotion at times after Sandy Hook, for example, you know, gives me the confidence to say things to you all like, I've cried on the House floor of the legislature, and not know that that's not okay, or to know that that's not okay. Bobby Kennedy was a big person for me as well. His connection to wanting to support folks in the South who were discriminated against and impoverished before he was assassinated in '68 is also someone that had an impact on me, as well as Warren Magnuson at our state as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So you've had a chance to answer our questions. Is there anything we haven't asked that you would like to say to persuade us to endorse you, or
Yeah.
to persuade voters to vote for you?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I mean, I guess I'll just say I'm really proud of the work that I've done in my first term. I've worked very hard on behalf of the people of the 42nd District, and I will continue that if reelected. I deeply believe in public service. It's why I got into this job. It's not always easy. I make a lot of friends in this job, and then I also don't make a lot of friends at certain times too. So I value that though, but I think these are important jobs that people need to do who believe in public service, and I really consider myself one of those folks. I also really respect the role of the media, and I'm not just saying that because I'm in front of you all now. We need an informed populace to help us make informed decisions. So I just want to mention that. I mean, other than that, what else can I tell you about myself? I mean, I grew up in Washington State, went to public schools throughout my life, very much believe in supporting our educators and supporting our schools across the education continuum. As I mentioned, I think we need to address housing, and I'm just really concerned about working families right now and the affordability challenges that they face. You know, we have a 4-year-old childcare is hard to come by. When Malcolm was born, our son, we immediately signed up for childcare waiting lists in our community. It's expensive. We need to work on that. You know, one way that I helped try to work on that in this last year was get funding for a new skills center at Meridian High School. This is going to help students have hands-on learning for the trades, but it's also going to have a new early learning facility with up to 120 slots right here in the heart of Whatcom County, and that's accessible for a lot of folks. So I think there are things that I tried to do in my first term to help with this issue and help with these issues of working families. And for as long as I'm in the legislature, I want to continue to do that.
Well, thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.